Some things, once you hear them, you can never unhear. And what Jim Caviezel just said publicly, it's one of those things.
Almost cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
That's the moment everything cracked open for him. But it gets music darker. It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just out it, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head. He's not talking about one person. He's talking about a network, a system, names you trust, names you grew up watching. And then he said the part that most people still music can't process. You know, they eat babies. That is not it's true. That's Jim Caviezel, the man who played Jesus Christ on screen. The man who gave up his entire Hollywood career to expose what's really happening to children behind closed doors. And what he's revealing about Epstein Music Island, specifically what was being done to kids and why, involves something the elite have been hiding for generations. They call it the young skin secret. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that means. Let's get into it. Before we go deep into the darkness, you need to understand who Jim Caviezel actually music is. Because this isn't some anonymous figure hiding behind a screen name. This isn't a conspiracy theorist in a basement. This is a man who stood at the absolute peak of Hollywood. Music, a man who was hand-selected by Mel Gibson to play Jesus Christ in Music: The Passion of the Christ, one of the highest-grossing films in history. A man who had every door open to him. And then he made a choice. He walked away from all of it to make a film the entire industry tried to bury. Music, a film called Sound of Freedom. A film about one thing and one thing only: rescuing children from trafficking networks. The movie is based on the true story of Tim Ballard, Music, a former government agent who left his career to personally rescue kids from trafficking operations across Latin America. And what Jim Caviezel witnessed while making that film changed him forever. They guys would come up, then they would, you know, right in front of us, ask us if we wanted Ninas or Ninos and a little boys or little girls. That wasn't a movie scene. That happened in real life in Colombia in broad daylight. Children being sold like products, music in front of a film crew. And when Caviezel brought this story back to Hollywood, a story about saving kids, he wasn't celebrated. He was blacklisted. Music, everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, Fox to every studio. Look, if you touch this thing, you will be out. You will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years. Music read that again. Every major studio, every major network told, not asked, Music told to stay away from a movie about rescuing children. Why? Why would an industry that claims to care about the vulnerable, an industry that puts ribbons on every lapel and speeches about justice at every award show, why would they bury a film about saving kids? Music, that's the question Caviezel started asking. And the answers he found lead directly Music to Epstein Island. When the Epstein documents were finally unsealed, the world expected a few familiar names. What they got was a sprawling list that shook every foundation of public trust. Celebrities, music politicians, producers, philanthropists, people who had spent decades building public images as helpers, music as humanitarians, as the good ones. And then there was Oprah Music Winfrey. Her name appeared in those documents not once, not twice, 5 times. Music now, her defenders will say appearing in documents doesn't equal guilt. And legally, that's true. But Jim Caviezel isn't making a legal argument. He's pointing at a pattern of proximity, music, a pattern of protection, and a pattern of silence that music stretches back decades. Because this isn't just about Epstein. It's about what was happening on that island and in private estates across America. Things that go beyond trafficking in the conventional sense. Things involving children's bodies. Things involving extraction. Things the public was never supposed to know about. And that brings us to the young skin secret. This is the part most channels won't touch because beyond the trafficking, beyond the island, there is a specific reason. According to multiple witnesses across different elite circles, why the most powerful people in Hollywood have been participating in these practices for generations, it's not just about power. It's not just about control. It's about youth. Jim Caviezel has spoken publicly about a culture within Hollywood's upper tier. A culture rooted in the belief that music vitality can be literally consumed, that youth can be transferred, that there are biological properties in young human tissue that the ultra-wealthy have been quietly accessing for generations through channels that never appear in any public record. Sources describing conditions on Epstein Island and in associated private estates have referenced procedures, treatments, things done to children that go beyond trafficking. Things involving the extraction of biological material from young bodies for use in treatments designed to preserve the appearance and vitality of the adults who funded those music visits. Now, here's what makes this harder to dismiss than it used to be. The mainstream medical community has begun openly discussing compounds derived from young blood, adrenochrome-adjacent research, plasma transfusion trials, stem cell protocols, all positioned as legitimate anti-aging science. What witnesses are describing is the black market version of that science. The version that doesn't require ethics boards, the version that doesn't require consent, the version that requires an island with no cameras and a very short guest list. She believed consumption was transformation, that youth could be taken in, that vitality could be absorbed. She talked about ancient rites, about elites throughout history who understood what the masses didn't. Ancient rites, music elites throughout history. The claim isn't that this is something new. The claim is that this is something very, very old. A tradition passed down through circles of power. A tradition that requires absolute secrecy and absolute complicity. Here's the chilling mechanism of how that complicity works and why so few ever speak. Once you participated, knowingly or unknowingly, you were bound because what you had consumed made you as guilty as the person who served it. Once you shared that secret, whatever you believe you'd consumed, you were bound to the group. No one betrays a circle that can destroy them. No one betrays a circle that can destroy them. That's not just a social dynamic. That's an engineered trap. And it's been described by multiple sources as the single most effective way the elite class has protected its secrets for generations. You don't just attend the party, you become part of the party. And once you're in, there is no out. Music, that's why Caviezel's 8-armed octopus metaphor is so precise. You don't just cut off an arm, you have to take the head. Because every music arm, every individual in that network is simultaneously a victim of the system and a protector of it. They are trapped and they music know it. And the people at the top, they designed it that way on purpose. Music now, let's talk about Oprah because her role in this story, according to Jim Caviezel, isn't simply that of a wealthy person with suspicious associations. Her role is music structural. She is, in his words, the gatekeeper. Think about what that actually means. Oprah Winfrey has more cultural influence than almost any individual in American history. She decides which books people read, which doctors people trust, music which politicians people vote for, which stories people never hear about. She put Harvey Weinstein on her arm at every major industry event for decades. She introduced him to young actresses. She gave him the most powerful social credential in Hollywood, her personal endorsement. I believe it's going to move a lot of whistleblowers to come forward. And not one in the hundreds, maybe thousands of them worldwide start coming forward and telling the truth of what's really going on. That young woman trusted a predator because Oprah was standing next to him. That's not a coincidence. That's a mechanism. And whether Oprah knew exactly what she was enabling or not, at a certain point, ignorance stops being a defense and music starts being a choice. She did the same thing with Jot of God, a Brazilian faith healer she promoted to millions. Winfrey there with him who entered the room and was swinging off his arm and just seemed like a very dear friend. And these like Oprah, Naomi, Rita, and Georgina, they all sat at his table. And for me, meeting Oprah was like, oh my God. Like, I would have thought that I would have to be someone who is established, who everyone would have had to know about before I was privileged enough to meet someone like Oprah. So, that gave me so much confidence in him at the time when he approached. A man later convicted of serially assaulting dozens of women. A man whose background any basic researcher could have flagged. And yet Oprah gave him a global platform. Then there's Diddy. Oprah was a fixture at his events. The same circles now under federal investigation. Harvey Weinstein, John of God, Diddy, Music Epstein's files, the South African school where abuse allegations surfaced and then quietly disappeared. The pattern is identical every single time. Music proximity, validation, silence, rebrand, and then perfectly timed, a philanthropy surge to redirect public attention. Music every time the heat gets close. Oprah doesn't run, she rebrands. Now, we need to talk about what happens to people who try to speak. And Music Aish was Ellen DeGeneres' girlfriend throughout the late 1990s. Theirs was one of the most publicly visible relationships in Hollywood. Magazine covers, red carpets, the perfect music progressive love story. But witnesses close to and described a very different private reality. Sources who claim to have worked alongside and on a documentary about child trafficking, a project called Children of the Machine, have described her as someone who witnessed things during her time with Ellen that she spent years trying to process. Things she could barely articulate. Things that when she finally started putting them into words for the documentary apparently made her a liability to very powerful people. Just go to bed. We're white. Just where everything is white. Drink the water. Take the herb. In August 2022, an A died following a fiery single-car crash in Los Angeles. High speed, a residential structure, flames. The official conclusion was accident, but people close to and sources within the documentary team have been vocal about their belief that the timing was not coincidental. She didn't go through hell for nothing. We'll get it out there. We are not stating this as confirmed fact. We are reporting what witnesses are saying, what the people closest to and believe. But when you understand the broader pattern Caviezel has been describing, when you understand that Epstein himself died in federal custody with malfunctioning cameras and a conveniently transferred cellmate, the question of whether powerful people silence inconvenient witnesses stops being paranoid fantasy and starts being documented historical reality. Jim Caviezel has said this film would move whistleblowers to come forward. That crash wasn't random. It was a hit to shut her up. And the poison started way before in her relationship with Ellen. Hundreds, thousands worldwide. Music. That's not the language of someone talking about a small operation. That's the language of someone who knows the full scope. And here's the data that backs up his urgency. Over 300,000 children under the age of 18 have been pulled into trafficking operations in the United States alone. And then there's the border. 85,000 children crossed the border this last year and disappeared. Where did they disappear? 85,000 music children, no follow-up, no records, no answers from anyone in power. Where did they go? That is not a rhetorical question. That is an open criminal investigation. Music and every name in the Epstein files, every person on those flight logs, music every guest in those estate basement is a potential answer music to that question. Jim Caviezel isn't just exposing a past. He's predicting a future. At conferences across the country, gatherings of people paying attention to the Epstein fallout, music to the trafficking data, to the disappearing children. Caviezel has been describing what he calls the event, a divine reckoning, a storm of all storms. He's positioning the Epstein documents not as an ending, but as a trigger, the last domino before a cascade of arrests, exposures, and institutional collapse. I know that the saints in heaven wish to be on this earth right now because there are far more people on this earth than there's ever been. And there are far more souls to save right now than there ever has ever been. That's prophetic language. That's the language of a man who believes he is standing at a hinge point in history. And whether you share his spiritual framework or not, the facts underneath his fury are music real. The files are real. The names are real. The missing children are real. The pattern of silence, complicity, music, and institutional protection is real. Jim Caviezel asked one question years ago that still hangs in the air today. If what he's saying wasn't true, if these people were innocent, they'd sue him into oblivion. They'd be in court tomorrow. But Oprah isn't suing. Ellen isn't facing a public inquiry. The circles Caviezel is describing are still intact, still protected, still operating behind the same walls of money and media influence that have shielded them for decades. Children of the Machine, the documentary and Aish was working on, is reportedly still being finished. The team is still underground, still building the case. Music, and they've said they will release it no matter what. When that happens, the names you've heard in this video won't be the last ones. They'll be the music beginning. Jim Caviezel told us the octopus has 8 arms. He told us you have to take the head. And right now, the world is finally starting to look for it. Stay locked in because this story isn't music over. It's just getting started.